Welcome. Welcome to my talk on healing and the Course in Miracles. We are going to talk tonight about atonement and about fear. Two very important teachings in this course. The fear that we have of each other, the fear that we have of being hurt physically or mentally, and how we can handle the fears that we have. And I just referred to several fears. The fear over the people, the fear of being hurt, for instance in an accident, and so on and so on. This is what we are used to here on earth, to have. We have all these concepts of fear. But we learn in this spiritual path that there is indeed the greatest of all fears in everyone's mind. But we are not used to think in those terms. The Course refers to the fear we have of God. And the Course teaches that from this fear that we have mentally built in our thought system before we had this form, before we had the body form, this fear is what causes us to imagine that we are separated not only from each other but from our source. And this fear is what causes us to come down here to earth in order to learn to correct it. What an interesting concept. Somehow we built in a thought system by which we fear God. And then we choose to come to earth and invent all kinds of fears which seem so real. In space and time. Fears, I'm just thinking of fear of cancer, fear of sickness, fear of illness. A million, trillion kinds of fear. Fear of snakes. Fear of snakes. I mean, many people really do fear snakes. Alright? And as a matter of fact, I saw recently somewhere in the New York subway a man with a huge snake, which I figured was a plastic, was not a real snake. Couldn't be a real snake. It was about this thick and big all around his neck, and he was just having fun in the subway. And of course I ran away from the guy as far as I could. I even got off the wrong station and waited for the next train. I didn't want to run in the same train, to be in the same train with a guy with a snake, especially bigger than I was. Woo! Well, it turned out, a few days later, guess what? I saw him in my neighborhood. He's my neighbor. It's going to be very hard for me to really let go of this snake fear. I'm not going to change and move to another apartment or another part of town. So I have to learn to handle the fear of snakes myself. Alright? This is life in New York. There are snakes everywhere, but they are invisible. This one is visible. And the interesting thing is that it is a very peaceful snake. Alright? obviously, this is something that I have to see. How am I going to handle the next time I see this fellow? Am I going to cross the street, run away from him and his snake? Or am I going to meditate and ask for help on how to handle the snakes in my mind? All right? So, we are trying to understand here that all fears come very deep down from the fear that we have, that we separated from God, that we separated from a higher source, and we will be punished and are being punished for it. I mentioned this before. Now let me read now one of the principles of the course that I would like to talk about. This is principle 26 on page 2 of the text. Miracles, I'm quoting now, miracles represent freedom from fear. Atoning means undoing. The undoing of fear is an essential part of the atonement value of miracles. End quote. So, miracles represent freedom from fear. Wow. So perhaps it will be a miracle the day I can handle the snakes, or a snake, the way this guy handles his snake. If nothing else, I am sure that is nothing but that may be nothing but a symbol for all of us to learn to handle the fears that we have. But according to the course, we cannot do that by ourselves, because we have built in a false ego thought system that insists that that snake is outside my mind. That snake lives with my neighbor. That snake shows up in the subway. This is what the false ego thought system teaches us, that the fear is outside our mind. We project the fear that I have of remembering and recognizing that I really never left my higher source. That fear that I have is projected outside my mind. In this case, in a way that my neighbor owns a big snake. I am avoiding to look inward, and until I look inward, the snake will keep showing up in my life. And this pertains to all of us. It's a great metaphor. Especially if you live in a big city like New York. We have fear. We fear the neighbors. We fear the walking in the street. We fear coming home after midnight. You name it. The moment that we decide, and according to what the course that teaches that we can correct all these thoughts, that is called the atonement. It is not the same way or the same concept as in the Christian teachings. The atonement of the Course in Miracles is exactly this, and simply this, the correction of fear in our minds. So how can we correct this? First, we have to understand that all our thoughts, all our mistakes are really not sins, that we have not sinned, when we choose to think that we are separated, we are not sinners, but we have made mistakes in our way of thinking. And the Course teaches, dear friends, this is very simple teaching. The Course teaches that the moment that we see our life this way, that we see our problems not as sins, but as mistakes in our thoughts, and that those mistakes can be corrected. That is the beginning of the handling, of the undoing of fear, and the process to atonement. The process of correction. Because according to these teachings here, according to the teachings of the Course in Miracles, we can all forgive ourselves and others when we realize that we made mistakes, not sins. Because sins, according to the Christian teachings, calls for punishment. And those of you who are brought up in the Christian tradition know about that also. Sin calls for punishment. You'll be punished if you sin. We teach this to children. You know. All right? You start very young learning all these things, learning all these wrong concepts, and later on in life we have to undo them. So sin calls for punishment, mistake calls for correction.